Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to 25 myths about America that just aren't true. So I think most people that, aren't American, have this preconceived idea about Americans. They live a certain way, they all eat a certain type of food, which is a bit ridiculous considering, America is there's over, I think, 250 million people that live there. 50 different states, so there's just no way that these myths can apply to everybody that live there.
The United States often draws a lot of flack from the rest of the world for everything, from its foreign policy to the way it runs its domestic affairs. In fact, it seems like there are few things that can divide the world more evenly and more strongly than asking people what their opinion is of the United States. Everyone has an opinion. Even in the same city, you'll meet people who fall on the extreme sides of the spectrum. But what is it exactly that causes America to be so messed up? Even America's own politicians can't seem to stop talking about how messed up things are. Well, today we're going to take a deeper look. Are things really as bad as everyone seems to think they are? I'm Mike with this.
No, things are rarely as bad as everybody thinks. It's just the media trying to whip up a frenzy, sell more, newspapers.
25, and these are 25 common misconceptions about the United States that simply aren't true. And as a very important note, this list was produced by both a United States citizen and two European citizens that relocated to the United States. It's written to be as fair as possible. No, I'm not two Europeans. Or am I?
No, you're not.
All right, let's begin with a really common thought. Americans are ignorant about the world. Americans are held to an unrealistic standard. Since the rest of the world watch our movies and listen to our music, they know a lot about our country. But let's be honest, they never studied it. People actually complain that Americans don't even know that Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. But neither does half the United Kingdom, and they're on the same continent. It turns out that all of us are pretty bad at geography.
I would say that most people know that Czechoslovakia is now two countries, isn't it? You knew that. It's like Czech Republic and Slovakia.
You'd think America would be better at it, however, considering another common thought is that America spends its days spying on everyone. And that's true, but who doesn't? Germany, France, Switzerland, Japan, Iceland, and all the rest of us spy on each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
Moving on, America has been called racist. Please don't take this the wrong way. Racism definitely exists, and it makes the news. But you know what else? America also has a vicious media, and all of the world watches it, sometimes more than their own media. So when something super bad happens in other countries, it might not even make the back page.
Yeah.
Next, it's a common misconception that Americans don't use public transport. While it's true that we use cars a lot, many regions in America have great public transport, or at least just as good as Europe. Besides, what good is a train if nobody can afford it?
Yeah, to be fair, New York definitely has. I would say their metro system in New York is almost as good as the one in London. Maybe I'm biased, but I think the London one's a little bit better. It's a bit more easy to understand. The seats are a lot more comfortable. It's cleaner.
We're looking at you, UK. Moving on. America does /has /is fill in the blank. America is far from being a unified entity. Each state has its own laws, cultures, and quirks. Some states have the death penalty. Some don't. Some have strict gun laws. And some don't. Some have free college. Some don't. Some have tax, and some don't. So just like you can't say Europe is so-and-so, you can't say the same about the US. As an additional note, the states are far more independent than many of us realize. In fact, every state even has its own military, known as the Guard. Furthermore, some states pass legislation that directly contradicts the federal government. This is because in the US, the federal government is not the highest authority, the states are. What? To further establish the fact that America...
But doesn't the president have sort of the final say-so on things in America? I thought that the president was still sort of the commander in chief, right?
It isn't a single entity. Many believe that Americans only speak one language. But that's no different from the rest of the world. Have you ever been to France? Or the UK? Or Italy? Or how about China? Most of them only speak one language too. That being said, over 20% of the US is bilingual.
Spanish, right?
Let's talk about the military, because people outside the US will preach that America's military does, again, fill in the blank. Nobody is naive enough to think that the US doesn't have selfish interests in mind when it invades a country. There isn't a nation on earth that would do that selflessly. But whenever the bad goes down, it's just as common for other countries to complain that America should do something. On a more or less lighter note, Americans are fat. You ever been to the UK lately? There are even scandals because obese patients are getting turned down for surgery. Yes, America does have an obesity problem. But not all citizens are involved in it. I am.
Yeah.
A big part of the United States is fairly health conscious and is consistently working to help the overweight population better their lives.
To be honest, England is getting fatter too. It is. I'm seeing more and more people, like compared to when I was in secondary school, it's so much different. Maybe it's the food. It's got to be the food. It's got to be the food people are eating. We're getting bigger over here.
Thanks, healthy people. And while we aren't perfect, many complain that America is worse than other developed nations in, well, everything. There are many statistics, child mortality, literacy, etc., where the US falls behind countries like Norway and Iceland. But those statistics are based on averages. In Norway, most of the 5 million inhabitants are rich, white, and Norwegian. If you took a similar sample of rich white Americans in the US, you would find that the statistics are almost exactly the same. The fact is that the US is hugely diverse, and the American experience is completely different with and without money. Translation? The problem isn't healthcare or education, it's economic inequality, almost exclusively. And speaking of inequality, many make the simple but powerful assumption that America just isn't safe. This is usually what foreign citizens say until they actually come here. By this same logic, Paris, Brussels, London, Madrid, and almost every other city in Europe is unsafe as well. Yes, there are guns, but most Americans have never seen or heard a gun being fired. In fact, most Swiss citizens are much more familiar with gunfire than us Americans.
Is that true? I mean, the homicide rate, I think, in America, on average, is higher than it is in other European countries, most European countries, I think. I did read it in an article, a Guardian article. Could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. But yeah, crime exists everywhere, obviously. Like, come on.
All this being said so far, people still expect all Americans to relish in a life of our stereotypes. Guns, fast food, and freedom! What I'm saying is, a lot of the world looks at America as overly patriotic. But here's an honest question. Have you ever met a Russian, Australian, a proud member of the UK? There's no shame in having pride in your country. Us Americans are definitely patriotic. But so is the rest of the world. As they should be. It's not a crime to be proud of where you came from.
Yeah, for sure.
But that doesn't stop others from thinking we only complain and boast about America whenever we travel abroad.
It is sad that people have started to kind of, see patriotism as a negative. I think you should be proud of where you're from, like 100%.
This is largely anecdotal. In America, Americans like to complain just like the rest of us. Only a few of them ever even leave the country, so you're meeting an unrepresentative sample. But in their defense, many times, they're right. Yes, this can hit hard in the pride spot, but maybe Europeans could stand to smile a bit more, right? No? Okay, fine, back to the apathetic, leave me alone face. By the way, that part was written for our European representative, by our European representative.
Was it really?
I love all of you. Anyways, statistics viewed by outsiders show that the US is lagging behind. Similar to topics we've already discussed, there's another factor that we have to take into account. Reporting. Every nation reports its own statistics. This means that making statistical comparisons between two developed nations, like the US and the UK, is an exercise in futility. The data is just too close and won't reveal much except that the US counts people one way and the US counts them another. That still doesn't make this misconception true. Americans are fake. Here's the thing. In Europe, citizens are almost proud of the fact that they're really standoffish. But once you get to know them, they're your friend for life. Well, here's a newsflash. Once you get to know an American, they'll also be your friend for life. The thing is, though, they don't use this as an excuse to be a jerk in the beginning.
Yeah, and I like that. I don't understand why being sort of snooty and standoffish is like seen as like a good thing. Like, I like friendly people. I think it's nice, you know? And I think most people like that too, you know. Oh, let me be an arrogant jerk, you know, just long enough, and then yeah, if they're still around, I'll be their friend. Come on.
This list sounds great coming from an American. I was totally the one who should have read this one, but I digress. On a totally different but very popular misconception, Americans are the only ones who call football soccer. Actually, a lot of the world calls it soccer. Even parts of Ireland still call it soccer. Oh, what do I mean by still?
Really?
I'm glad you asked. It was actually the British who coined the term soccer. The word soccer is an abbreviation of association and first appeared in universities in the 1880s, sometimes using the variant spelled soccer with a K. The word is sometimes credited to Charles Redford Brown, an Oxford University student said to have been fond of shortened forms such as brekkers for breakfast and rugger for rugby football. Britain actually started using the word football in the late 20th century, possibly because people incorrectly saw it as an Americanism.
I cannot believe the link between soccer and association never sort of connected in my brain until now. I'm kind of ashamed of myself.
This next one, Tristan couldn't believe. Could you not?
No.
I'm learning something. To our American viewers, did you know that people in Europe make fun of you for using air conditioning? Why do they need it? Why don't they just leave the window open? Mosquitoes, at least in Florida. But here's why they might be joining us soon. During the 2003 European heatwave, 70,000 people died. Whoa. This was in large part due to the fact that European homes and buildings are not typically equipped with air conditioning. While they laugh at the Americans for this, hotter summers are going to force them to take appropriate measures, especially since children and the elderly are very susceptible. Again, I stand by mosquitoes. I'm not opening my window in the summer. Winter, absolutely, open windows. Moving into the top 9.
To be honest, I think air conditioning is going to become a lot more popular over here. Like, the last 2-3 years, the summers here have been brutal. Not very long, but in terms of temperature, it's been so uncomfortable. Like, yeah, I need to get an air conditioner. I say this every year, but I actually do need to get an air conditioner.
And that's the weird number. Top 9. Many parts of the world accuse the United States of accounting for 25% of the world's carbon emissions. Not so nice. But it also accounts for 25% of the world's economic activity. The truth is that several nations, including countries like Canada, have higher per capita emissions than the US. Next, let's talk about how the world thinks Americans are ruining English. Actually, both British English and American English have diverged from a common 16th century ancestral standard, and in some ways, American English is closer to the original than British English. For example, American English has, for the most part, retained the language's rotosity, pronunciation of the R in words like hard, while British has, for the most part, dropped it. Furthermore, this shift in British English happened around the time of the American Revolution when wealthier Londoners wanted to distinguish themselves from the lower classes. This is only one example, but it goes to show that British English is not an unchanging standard any more than American English. On a totally different note, did you know that Americans don't all live in the suburbs? Nope, not true. The fact is that in America, you have plenty of people that live in cities like New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and...
I was shocked to see how expensive it is to live in New York City, though. Like, I did a video last week where I looked at what $500,000 could get you, and it was like a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in most of the boroughs in New York. It's just crazy. Like one of them was 600,000, and if you wanted to park, you had to spend $70,000 for a parking space.
The list goes on. In fact, several regions of the United States are very European, like the Northeast Corridor, for example. The difference between the US and Europe is that if you want to live in the suburbs in the US, you can, but you don't have to. Now, this next one is just offensive. Americans are all dumb rednecks. While there are certainly Americans who fit this stereotype, the vast majority don't. Most Americans live in cities near the coasts. Most of them are educated, and most of them are not very different from Europeans in any significant way. Every country has a less educated populace that they themselves make fun of. Even sophisticated nations like Sweden and Switzerland. Fair warning, the last 5 on our list get a bit dark and crazy.
Do you know what it is? I think it's because things like Florida Man and, you know, the typical sort of redneck hillbilly character in a movie, we see that a lot. So a lot of people think, oh, that's what all Americans are like, which is, it's crazy. I know, you shouldn't generalize like that.
Starting with the idea that America is imperialistic. In many parts of Europe, the United States is seen as an aggressive imperial power, even more so than Russia and China. This is largely because our military presence both in Europe and everywhere else. But in our strong defense, Americans never forced you to watch our movies, quarter our soldiers, obey our laws, or get permission to leave your own countries. It was the Russians that did that, and much, much more. Food for thought, after World War II, the Americans liberated and left. The Russians liberated and stayed. All right, number 4 is sure to be a shocker to a lot of foreigners. Americans don't actually all walk around with guns. It's just not true. Except for a few places, the only people you'll ever see carrying guns in America are the police. In fact, you'll see more people walking around with guns in Switzerland than you ever would in America. Okay, we admit.
Really? Wow. Because in New York, that I saw loads. Every officer I saw had one on them. At the airport at JFK, they had these massive rifles. It was crazy. It was like I was in Call of Duty.
That, like most stereotypes, there is some truth to this next one, but it's been wildly blown out of proportion. Americans are all crazy Christian right-wingers. There's something so right about saying it with that accent. Yes, there are a lot of Christians in America, and while some of them are crazy right-wingers, most of them aren't. In fact, if you ever get a chance to go and stay with one of those crazy Christian families, you'll see that most of them are just genuinely sweet people that go to church on Sundays. This next one sounds like a legit stand-up joke. If you get injured and can't pay for it, you'll just die in the street. Yeah, many people in Europe think this is what happens in America.
Yeah, man. I remember someone told me once that if you call an ambulance in America, when they get there, they perform a wallet biopsy where they check your wallet to see if you've got like an insurance card, and that like if you have one, they take you. If not, they leave you there. Like apparently it's completely false, but I believed that for a while.
As with most things that concern America, they're wrong. You can't be denied emergency medical care in the US. That would go against the Hippocratic Oath. The difference is that you get a bill in the mail a few months later. Of course, debt is another issue, but let's get into that right now. Americans are all in debt. Actually, European citizens carry more debt than Americans. The average household debt in the US, OECD, is 113% of the household's income. In the UK, it's 156%. In Sweden, 173%. And in Denmark, it's a whopping 305%. So, what are some misconceptions about the US that you'd like cleared up? Or do you live in America and want to put a stereotype to rest? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at list25. And as an American, I apologize for everything going on right now. Don't worry, 2020 is just around the corner.
I mean, that was a great video. I think a lot of the misconceptions he spoke about are, you know, unfortunately widely sort of accepted as truth here in Europe. I do think, though, as time goes on, they are becoming less and less sort of taken for gospel, because people travel, like a lot of American media and stuff is being consumed here. Like not just media like TV shows and stuff. I mean things generated by real people like TikTok videos and, you know, YouTube shorts and IG reels. So people in England are seeing real Americans and how they live and stuff, and it's not matching with a lot of these sort of preconceived ideas. So I do think over time, you know, it's going to change. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.